Hi, the book that today we will be reviewing is Days at Morisaki Bookshop. The guest that we have today with us is Dr. Saher. Thank you for joining us. I would like you to begin with the overview of how you found the book. Start.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mariam, for including me in this. I was introduced to the book by yourself. I think I might have found it eventually because I'm really on like looking through, especially Japanese and Korean cozy books, especially. So it was a recommendation that's really appreciated. Um, but yeah, what would you like next?
What did you find most interesting? For me, like I think the thing that I liked about the book was that they give a highlight on old bookshops because when I first got the book from a bookstore, I didn't think it's about an old bookshop. So I liked how they highlighted the importance of why we need old bookshops as well. What
No,
about you?
I think for me, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think it's also very interesting. I don't know where you like, did you get the book from like a new bookstore or an old
No,
bookshop?
I actually got it from a bookstore at my university.
Okay. Oh no, that's very interesting. Yeah. I think like it's interesting that you say that because I know that especially my childhood had a lot of old bookstores. Like it was a
Okay.
thing that we would go to of like, okay, Sahar, you can get three books. And it was always like a nice ritual to go back and then return and exchange. But I think like when I was reading it, it was honestly at the very perfect time as well because I've been going through a lot of difficult transitions in my life, and so I didn't really want something that was very stressful. So I was a bit worried that, oh, is this going to be a very fast paced, happening type book? But it wasn't. Like the pace was perfect, the vibe was perfect. What really resonated with me was that sense of self discovery, which didn't necessarily come from, like very, very highs or lows. So, like, she does go through a big transition. And I like how family came through for her, especially someone that she didn't expect. And then how,
Especially
like,
the
the
uncle, yeah.
yes. Yeah. So I think like I really like how he was introduced and how you as a reader, like your relationship changes with him over time as well. But I really liked how the bookshop itself was like the place for self-discovery and like healing for her. And I'm a geographer by training, so I think that for me was like also a very specific thing, like how this one place is like the center of the whole experience, even when she leaves for a bit. So yeah, I think that was for me like the most important thing. But yeah, there's lots of other things as well that we can talk about.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I found interesting was that there are like a lot of Japanese book references because like we don't really read Japanese books, so we wouldn't know any of them. So any particular quote that you would like to that you liked among the books that they shared?
Specific quotes from those books, not necessarily, but I really liked the descriptions of the stories themselves. So I think the one
Okay.
story where like she's like the book that that one gentleman that she meets in the coffee shop where she's like, okay, this is an interesting book.
Yeah,
And
that book was
then yeah.
interesting.
So I think I think the best way to say it would be like the paraphrased descriptions of those books, because
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
also then seeing that book through her eyes. So for some of them, then I went and looked at the descriptions themselves of like, okay, so what is the book actually about? So you can see what elements that she focuses on because of her perspective, and then how she couches it with the context she was in. So like even the first book that she reads when she's having that very difficult first night, and she's like, "Oh, I wish I had something to read," and then it's like, oh, "Hold on, there's like hundreds of books around me," and like that, the first instinct she has is to just like, okay, pick a book randomly because she has no idea where to start. So I think those were quite interesting. But no, I don't think I would have a specific quote, but it was nice also to see it because I really like the older Japanese detective series. And like the writing structure and style is just very different. So yeah, no, that was good. I really like books that talk about other books because, I want to say that hopefully I can go back and read some of the older writers that she was mentioning as well. So that's something I would really like, but not sure if that will happen
I
immediately.
think for me, the turn off of this book was the part two of the book when they started too much focusing on the aunt and not on the bookshop. And I'm like, this is supposed to be about the bookshop and the experience of the bookshop. But then they go hiking in the mountains and just like the part one of the book and the part two of the book are like two different stories. Like I find that they don't link together. at least for me, like I was expecting it to be more about the bookshop, but the part two, I felt it was more about travel, more about explaining how Japan is. That's how I felt. Well, how do you think about that?
That's no, I remember the first time I was reading it, I knew I was on a train.
Yeah.
I think I was going to work or something. And so when part one ended, it is such a
Yeah.
neat and perfect ending. I was like, oh, that ended much
Exactly.
faster. And I was like, oh, now I look for the translator's note. It was like part two, okay. So it was an uncomfortable transition. And I think because so I've just reread it recently in preparation for this as well. And I think like the way I can kind of reconcile it is that conversation that she has with her uncle where she's also like, so you traveled all over the world but now you're back. Like for
Yeah,
her,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was very that, okay, nothing has changed in your life. And like, what was the point of all of that? And I think that's something that I also personally relate to a lot of like, what if at the end you just go home and then is that a failure? So I think like in some ways, part two is kind of like that. So I also found the part where she's traveling with her aunt very weird. But I think that's
That
more of
doesn't
like,
connect with the story because the story was about
yeah,
the bookshop and her experience of how her life changed because of the bookshop. And then in part two, it's completely like a different story. It like doesn't connect. I think that was a turn off for me in this book, that I did not as much enjoy reading the second part because for me that did not link with the story.
I mean, my suggestion is if you have time, which I know you don't because you also have other books, is to reread the book again because the way
Okay.
that it kind of worked for me the second time around. So the first time around, I was like you, I was like, okay, what? And I didn't really like the aunt character as well because I was so invested in the uncle. And I was like, oh no, this
Yeah,
horrible
same.
person who's hurt him. So I think like it worked for me in some way because like at the bookshop is always like that emotional anchor for the main character. I don't know about the aunt, but even the aunt, like after everything, she comes back. So I feel like it kind of makes like the uncle's point again that even though you're not there, like the thing that is anchoring you is sort of always there, even if you're not always aware of it. So I feel like it was a short trip. They were always meant to come back. So I think it kind of works with like the undergrounding messaging that maybe is in the book, but yeah, I think like it was quite off-putting because I also found like the aunt just really, like yeah, I think
Self-centered.
yeah. But then, you do hear the story and then you do feel for her, which then makes you feel a bit bad. But then she leaves again. Sorry, I don't want to spoil things too much. But I think like the way it works is because the place remains the anchor because she's
Yeah.
always feeling like, oh, I don't want to let down my uncle and like, oh, he must be so worried or stressed out. So that kind of works. But yeah, first time around, it was just too disjointed. But I also found that for like a lot of the little instances that keep coming up in the book, like it's very I think Japanese focus of books as well, like they don't follow like the same type of structure. So I did kind of expect that, but there were a few things where you're like, okay, but why is this here? Why do I care? It's not part of that. But then is that just because I'm expecting a different story? But yeah. Were
Anything
there
you would
any,
like to
sorry,
end with? Is there anything that you would like to end with
I
regarding the
think what
notes for anyone who wants to read this book?
I think read it also because all the other characters you find are really interesting. Because I really like Sabu, that
Yes, I like
long-term
Sabu, the
customer.
old friend. Yeah.
Yeah, and like he also gets so invested. So I would
Yeah.
say definitely read it if you want like I feel like a cozy book is a very unfair title, but it's a very good reflective book, and it can be a really good way to also like look at your own life, like no matter where you are. But yeah, I think like it's the place, the bookshop itself, and then all the other characters you meet that are really interesting. So, highly
Yeah.
recommend it.
Thank you so much for your time and looking forward to talking to you again. Thank you.